G'day everybody, welcome to the FightFit Podcast. Got my bro Jordan Ballerini, fellow commentator. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, and we had a great night on Saturday night, big time boxing. You were in the commentating booth, and you did a fine job.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was only my, I did a few on the Team Alice card as well, and that was my debut. But this one, I'd say, was my proper debut of doing full card.
Yeah, it was your proper debut. You had about 7 or 8 fights. You commentated 3 Australian title fights, and it was good to work with you alongside Matthew Pilios, who was leading the way.
Yeah, Matty Pilios, the anchor.
Yeah, the anchor. He's a legend, Matty Pilios. He's the one who actually got me into commentating. So, I love him a lot, and he's an entertainer. That's the thing with Matthew Pilios. He calls it like it is, and really gets the crowd involved in the commentating call.
Yeah, and how did you get started in commentating?
Yeah, so I started commentating sort of amateur soccer, so it was more MPL2 for Springvale White Eagles.
Oh, nice.
So the club down there in the southeast, and then I got into also talking onto radio as well. So on the RadioPublic, which is a Peninsula radio, talking all sports, so different subjects: tennis, soccer, basketball, and boxing as well. And then from then, I sent Matty Pilios an email and said, is any openings maybe to get sort of involved in commentating? At first there wasn't, because there was already commentators involved in big time boxing. But then after he sent me an email back probably about 3 months later and said that you can join the team. And what I did at the start was writing a lot of notes for these sort of guys, for Julian Holland and Matthew Pilios, writing notes, just watching them and admiring their work. And then there was an opening to commentate with Brad Vicali, because Matt Pilios was the MC for the night on one of the big-time boxing shows. So I came in, and last minute they said, you got to commentate this event. And, I did it with Brad Vicali, and everything went well. And from then, we moved on to, some bigger shows where I commentated alongside Matthew Pilios, in the anchoring role. And since then, haven't looked back, done shows for numerous promoters, the likes of Team Alice, Isham Hanna out of Kings of Combat, Big Time Boxing, Adam Wilcock over in Tasmania, as well as Ange DiCarlo. So there's some of the names or some of the promoters that I've commentated for.
Beautiful, and you're loving it so far, hey?
I love commentating. One of my idols growing up was the great Rex Hunt.
Okay.
I watched a lot of footy growing up, when I was, 6, 7 years old, and just listening to him on 3AW, commentating, with some big names, the likes of Clinton Gribus, the late Clinton Gribus, who was probably one of the best commentators of all time. And for me, they're probably the best team, Rex Hunt and Clinton Gribus, in terms of calling on the radio. So I'll listen to a lot of Rex Hunt, and he was my idol, just growing up, and sort of taking a little bit of sort of his sort of traits into my sort of commentating style. And that's how I commentate now. Really try to bring the crowd into the broadcast.
When you say bring the crowd into it, how do you mean so?
Yeah, so bring a lot of sort of excitement. You don't want to be sort of saying stats all the time. You want to be calling play-by-play. So, the right hook, the left hook. But then when there's not much, action going on, you want to sort of talk a little bit about stats. But you want to bring the broadcast into people's lounge rooms. So that's what I try to do.
What do you mean by broadcasting to people's lounge rooms?
Yeah, so you sometimes get those people that you sort of get those ABC or sometimes ABC commentators, with just the basic. There's not much excitement going on.
Okay, cool.
So I try to sort of change it up and just make it entertaining for the viewer, like they're sort of at the fights.
Okay. Yep. Okay, I see. And if you feel like you're really sort of now merging your own sort of style?
Yeah, I've got my own style now. I've watched a lot of Matty Pilios. He's probably the greatest at doing it on the boxing scene in terms of excitement. But with me, I've got a lot of knowledge, so background information that I bring into it, statistics and that sort of thing. So I try to merge the two together to create a great product, for Epicenter TV. They're doing a great job for global boxing.
Right. And have you always been a sports nut?
Yeah, all sorts of sports. You look at tennis. I love tennis. I go to the Australian Open every year, but I don't just go to the Australian Open. I watch, all-round tennis throughout the year, the Grand Slams, the Tennis Masters events, as well as, the small tournaments as well. Even the challenges, I like to, watch the stream on the internet and watch those minor events. And soccer and boxing are two of the sort of major sports that I love a lot. So yeah, definitely those two.
I love them as well. I love soccer. Are you a Premier League man?
No, so my mum's actually born in Spain, so I'm a La Liga
Oh,
fan.
you're a La
Yeah,
Liga fan.
La Liga fan. So a
You're
bit
dying breed.
yeah, so a bit different to the the normal person who loves the EPL, and it's still an exciting league. But for me, the La Liga, I'd have to say, is the best league in the world. You look at the top two teams there, Barcelona and Real Madrid. In the last 10 years, they've been in Champions League finals, as well as Atletico Madrid, who's the third probably best team in Spain, but they've been in finals in Europe. So for me, the La Liga is the best league, but England's not far off.
Disagree with you there, brother. La Liga is the best league.
Yeah,
I think with the monopoly that the Premier League is creating because of the television rights and the amount of money that they've brought in, they've got about 5 or 6 big players, and then all of the bottom teams in the Premier League are now becoming much more financially competitive, and it's becoming much closer. Like you see Leicester in the top 4 this year. Sheffield United are in the top 6.
Great result at the weekend for Sheffield United. You know, they've come up from the Championship, and you know their main goal at the start of the season, Sheffield, would be just to survive. But they're really challenging for those European spots.
Yeah. So when you look at the comparison, I think in terms of you got the powerhouses in Real Madrid and Barcelona, and they've really just dominated Europe over the last 10 years, as you said. But then I think that in terms of a level playing field, you in La Liga, you'll often find that if Real Madrid will go down against the bottom team, like a Getafe or
a Levante or one of those sort of sides, you know, they pretty much walk through them, you know, maybe 4 or 5-0. But when you get into the EPL, maybe it's a bit different. You get the bottom side, maybe like a Watford, who is at the bottom at the moment, and they can still challenge, you know, the top side like Liverpool on any given day. So, you know, I still just like the La Liga, you know, in the
who do you support?
So in the La Liga, Real Madrid, of course. Okay. But in England, I still like, you know, Blackburn Rovers. They're my team. You know, they won the Premier League in the 90s.
Is that because Lucas Neal and all that used to play for them?
No, there was a Spanish guy, a right back called Michel Salgado, who was playing for them around about, I think it was 2009, 2010. He moved from Real Madrid to Blackburn, and ever since then, I started going for them.
Wow. Because they had quite a strong Aussie contingent at one stage. I remember Lucas Neal played for them, and
Brett Emerton as well.
Emerton.
Yeah. So right. They're the two major names that went across to Blackburn Rovers, and both had great careers there. So that's a bit about me in terms of the clubs I follow in Spain and England.
Yeah. Well, crazy. I mean, I went to a La Liga game as well. I went to Atletico versus Barca, and I've been to maybe 5 Premier League games. But when I was in Barcelona, I went to a La Liga game, and the atmosphere was good, but there was a lot of seats empty. And because I was thinking it's going to be crazy hard to get seats.
What game was that? The Real Madrid and Barcelona game?
Atletico and Barca.
It's quite interesting that it was
at the new camp.
It was
beautiful stadium.
Quite interesting that a few of the seats were empty. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have thought it would have been, you know, because the Spanish are such crazy football fans. But for whatever reason.
Yeah, definitely fanatics. The Spain, that's their number one sport over there. But yeah, it's definitely number one sport there, but they also like a few other sports as well. There's a Spanish boxer by the name of Kerman Lejaraga, who's probably the biggest name in Spanish boxing. He's in the welterweight division. He's lost his last couple of fights, but he was gearing up to fight the likes of, you know, Errol Spence and Sean Porter in the welterweight division. So they love their sports, the Spanish.
Italians love their boxing as well.
Yeah, you got some...
I was surprised to see how much they love it when I went to Rome.
Yeah, you got a few sort of Italian-American fighters that have come through over the years. Rocky Marciano is definitely one of the top of the list there. And, you know, Europe's getting big in boxing. You know, Russia's, of course, going to be the pinnacle in terms of Europe. But in all sorts of Europe, yeah, they love their boxing.
Well, they've got, you know, guys like Lomachenko coming from the Ukraine. It's probably, would you say Eastern Europe has a stronger boxing?
Yeah, I think Eastern Europe's probably, in terms of boxing, yeah, that's the stronger part of Europe. And there's another guy by the name of Alexander Usyk, who was the undisputed
pound at the moment.
Undisputed cruiserweight champion, has now gone up to heavyweight. So I think he's going to fight some of the big names, the likes of Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, in maybe 2020 or 2021.
Do you reckon he's just gone up there because that's where the big money is? That's where the big names are?
Yeah, that's where the big money fights. You look at the cruiserweight division, still for me, probably the weaker divisions in terms of world boxing. But as I said before, talking to you earlier, we still got the likes of Sugarcane Watts, Jai Opetaia, Mark Bam Bam Flanagan on the domestic scene. But you look on the world stage now, and the guy that just beat Sugarcane Watts for me is going to be the undisputed champion, I think, in 2020, Arsene Goulamirian, the Armenian-born French fighter.
He is a real weapon. when I was watching him fight. He's just got a lovely style. He's nice and clean. He picks his shots beautifully. He just hit Sugarcane with that body shot. And if anybody has done sparring before and they've ever been hit with one of those body shots, it doesn't look like much. But when you get clocked in just that right spot, it doesn't take much power. You're going down, and you'll be down on the ground like writhing, trying to get your breath back, and it's a terrible feeling.
Yeah, it was lethal with a capital L, that body shot there on Sugarcane Watts. But Sugarcane Watts provided a stern test. But Arsene Goulamirian, as you said, very skilled fighter. He's a strong boxer, real power hitter. He now moves to 25-0. And the likes, I think he probably fight maybe Unier Dorticus from Cuba, maybe in 2020.
You think Kane will?
No, Arsene Goulamirian. Yeah. But for Kane Watts, there's still the big domestic level matchups. If we're talking Australian boxing now, the likes of Mark Bam Bam Flanagan possibly.
Tell us about these guys who are potentially in line, or who are in that cruiserweight division, how old they are, and what their record is and all that.
Yeah, so you look at the cruiserweight division, probably the pinnacle on the domestic scene is Jai Opataya. He just beat Mark Bam Bam Flanagan a couple of weeks ago on the National Boxing Series over in the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney. Stopped him towards the back end of the fight, but was really dominant from start to finish. He's a southpaw, really slick southpaw, and he's got a lot of upside, only in his early 20s.
Wow, that's
so
great.
Definitely one to watch, and I do believe he's going to be challenging for world titles come next year.
Wow.
Sugarcane Watts, of course, as we mentioned, he's definitely one on the cruiserweight scene. Mark Bam Bam Flanagan, if he doesn't continue, well, because he lost to Jai Opataya, there's still going to be some big level fights there for him. And another guy by the name of David Light. He's from New Zealand, but has fought a few fights over in Australia, and he defeated Mark Bam Bam Flanagan this year. And his record's currently 14-0, and he's definitely one to watch for. David Light for me, though, and Jai Opataya from Australia, the two to watch out for in the cruiserweight division.
What about Jason Waitley?
Yeah, Jason Waitley, of course. He's fighting for the Australian title on Wildfighter December 14. That's another quality card that Will Tomlinson's put together. The main event, Daniel Russell. He's a good quality fighter, but I think that Jason Waitley's got a strong skill set. He's a neat boxer, Jason Waitley. Even though in his one of his fights this year against Viktor Oganov from Russia, he got clipped in the second round and nearly got stopped, he showed that his neat boxing skills can take him a long way. So I think that in the main event of Wildfighter, Daniel Russell and Jason Waitley, you're going to see that Waitley probably maybe stops his opponent there in Daniel Russell from Queensland.
Nice. And our most recent card that we called just on the weekend was obviously the big time boxing card, one of Brian Armatruda's cards. It was a fantastic evening. It was buzzing the whole night. The fight quality was awesome as well. 3 Aussie titles. We saw Taylor Harris win her second title, which was amazing.
Yes.
We saw Fega Opelu.
Yeah, Fago, but Django is his nickname.
Django?
Yeah, from Samoa. Yeah.
He is a very dangerous man.
He's a lethal fighter, lethal puncher with 9 KOs to his record and 12 wins.
Yeah, and he was one that I think is a really exciting one to watch. And is he in his mid-20s?
Yeah, he's only 25, turning 26, I think, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So definitely one to watch there. He's got some big fights on the horizon, considering he beat Chris Jezewski in the middle rounds.
Considering that, and Chris Jezewski is a really, really nice boxer, and he's also a real athlete as well. He moves well, and yeah, he's not like an overweight heavyweight, or he's not like a sloppy looking heavyweight at all. I know that's the wrong word to use because these guys are obviously good athletes, but he's a real physical specimen for a heavyweight.
Yeah, he's come from a decent sporting background. Played for Craigieburn in the footy over there, but on the boxing scene, yet to taste defeat. Only had the one draw, but he lost his first fight against Fago Opelu. But Chris Jezewski's going to be back. Sometimes, if you lose that fight, it makes you more hungry for the next fight. And he's managed by the best in the business in Brian Armatruda. So in 2020, Tujevski will be back.
And how do you see that going?
Yeah, I think Tujevski on the Victoria, there's going to be some fights there for him on the Victorian scene. He'll probably have a couple more tune-up fights before maybe that Australian title opportunity comes again, So there's the likes of Russell from Queensland who could fight Tujevski in 2020 if he loses to Jason Waitley. But Fago Opelu now goes to bigger and better things. there's opportunities now for him to, defend his Australian title or even maybe fight for those regional straps. There's another guy by the name of Joe Goodall from Queensland, who's a Commonwealth Games champion, and maybe him and Fager Opelu in 2020 could be a good matchup, in Queensland or maybe over here in Victoria.
And as I mentioned, that we also saw Taylor Harris as well. I really enjoyed that fight. For me, that was my favorite fight of the night, just because Janae Harris really put it on her for the first 3 rounds. And there weren't many times in that whole fight where I was thinking, okay, this is cool, this is safe. These girls are just feeling, no, they just came out there and they both put the pressure on. And that could have gone either way in those first 3 rounds. But what Taylor Harris did was she showed a lot of heart, which is something that she hasn't really been tested like that, I've found so far in her fights.
Yeah, she came out guns blazing in that fight against, in her last fight. But in this fight, definitely slow off the blocks. And, Janae Harding, for me, unofficially on the scorecards, was 3 rounds to 0 up, maybe 2 rounds to 1 up. And then she got the stoppage in the 4th round, Taylor Harris. And that was the end of Janae Harding, who's now sustained 2 knockout defeats. But Taylor Harris now is a 2-time champion in 2 different weight classes in terms of Australian titles. Now there's maybe opportunities for that world title shot in 2020. She's definitely got that social media backing and that big support behind her. I think anything's possible. I'd like to see Clarissa Shields and maybe Taylor Harris go head-to-head at the end of 2020 or 2021. But, for me on paper, Clarissa Shields would be the favourite, but anything's possible with Taylor Harris. She's definitely one of a kind.
Tell us about Clarissa Shields. Clarissa Shields.
Yeah, Clarissa Shields. She's an undisputed champion in the middleweight division. So Taylor Harris has dropped down to super welterweight, and if she goes up, she fights Shields. Shields is one of a kind for me. She's probably the best female fighter we've seen in the last 20 years. She's an African-American.
Pretty much untouchable at the moment.
Yeah, she's untouchable at the moment. She's come up against some of the best supposedly on the world stage and just, comfortably dispatched them. So, that's maybe a good fight to have maybe in Melbourne, maybe somewhere like the, MCG or Marvel Stadium, something like that would get people down to the fight.
Wow, that would be truly amazing to have a big world title fight like that with a female headliner in Australia at a big stadium like that.
Yeah, you get, in the past we've had the likes of Costa Zoo headline at the old, Telstra Dome and that sort of thing.
Danny Green as well.
Yeah, Danny Green against Sugarcane Watts at Hisense Arena. But this is just different altogether. This would get the, the boxing community together, but even the casual fan who doesn't, support boxing too much, but loves their sport, well, they'll be definitely up and ready to watch that matchup.
It's a good thing that Taylor Harris is really bringing to the sport at the moment is that she appeals to the football fan because she's obviously got that AFLW background, but she also has a big, strong female fan base as well. And that really is a good way to show people that, boxing isn't just a blood sport or isn't just done by thugs, which is the common misconception of people who do combat sports professionally. And Taylor Harris is really kicking that stigma, I find, which is cool.
Yeah, she's an all-round athlete, and you get a lot of sort of rugby players now moving on to the the boxing scene. We just witnessed, Paul Gallen and Barry Hall go head-to-head, and I was very surprised with Barry Hall. He put up a great showing on his debut, considering, it was Paul Gallen's 10th fight. But Taylor Harris, for me, is definitely one to watch. You look at her wins in the past. She's come up against the likes of Marguerite Butcher and Janae Harding. Many people would probably say they're not strong opposition, but you can't put her against the best straight away. She needs tune-up fights. She hasn't been boxing for so long, so she's only going to get better from here. And with the backing she's got, she can go places, this girl.
In terms of pure boxing, that's accurate. But I find that Janae Harding, in terms of a fighter, is like no one to be turning your nose up at because she's had all of these fights in Bellator MMA. So she's a fighter. All by one of her victories were by TKO or KO. So when I saw that record and when I was watching her highlights and saw that she had defeated someone who trained out of Conor McGregor's gym in Ireland, I was very impressed with the CV. And when I saw her come out all guns blazing and really test and hurt Taylor, I was even more impressed.
Yeah, it was a great showing there from Janae Harding. the question, throughout the fight, I was thinking, could Janae Harding keep this up? That was the real question.
Yep.
But she kept it up until she got nailed. With a couple of flurries there from Taylor Harris. But she's definitely no slouch. She improved a lot from the fight they had in 2018 against Taylor Harris, where there was more to her game, and she provided a sterner test this time around. But she's definitely a great combat sports fighter, Janae Harding, and definitely love to see her again down here in Melbourne, maybe fighting another female.
Yep. And another fight for the Aussie title that we saw was Brent Rice versus Gage Island. Brent Rice, obviously a fantastic amateur career. He lost to Liam Wilson, who had 137 amateur fights, 123 victories, fantastic amateur. And Gage Island, who also had quite a few amateur fights as well, I believe 40 or...
Yeah, about 40 fights here, Gage.
Something like that. And it was a good fight, really good fight. It went the distance. It was a battle of two different styles, and it didn't quite go how we perhaps anticipated that the judges might have scored it.
Yeah, so, on paper, heading into that fight, I probably would have said that Gage Island might have had the slight favoritism, but during the fight, Brent Rice came out like a house on fire, started strong. You probably said that Gage Island was maybe 3 rounds up in the first 3 rounds. I had it differently. I had it 2-1 Brent Rice, so it was a solid start from him. But on the unofficial scorecards, I had it 8 rounds to 2 in favour of Brent Rice. And then we went to the final decision. It was a split draw. You can sometimes get that. We know that the defending champion was Gage Island. So maybe he's sort of had the upper hand because he was fighting in Melbourne as well. He was the more exciting fighter in that matchup. Maybe caught the eye of the judges. His come forward style, trying to maul his opponent. But Brent Rice throws a lot of straight punches. On the back foot, he's very comfortable, very slick. So there's no doubt about it. We might see a trilogy. In the first fight, if you remember, over in Queensland a couple of months back, Gage Island stopped him in the 4th round due to a cut on I think it was the right eye of Brent Rice. But this time around, Brent Rice was just a different animal, and he meant business. So I think maybe a trilogy fight to decide who's going to be the Australian heavyweight champion is probably what we're going to see in third time around.
Yeah. I would like to see that. I'll be very interested to see that because it is a very interesting stylistic battle between the two of them. And as you said, Gage Island really packs the pressure on, and he's just comes forward. He's aggressive. He's tenacious. And Brent Rice is really slick and was countering nicely with the slip and the little combinations, uppercuts, hooks. And I was really impressed. I was really impressed by them both. And you know what? If we see a trilogy fight, then that would be great.
Oh, definitely the fans, the Victorian fans, and also the Queensland fans would be in for a treat for that matchup. But Gage Island comes from a good team down there with Brian Butler in East End Boxing. So he's going to come back, I think, better in the third fight. He'll learn a lot from that. He'll watch the tape over, and Brian Butler, for me, is one of the best trainers in the business. He'll come with a decent game plan for the third fight. But very impressed by Brent Rice. Got a lot of upside, still a young fella, and in the lightweight division, that's another division I'd like to talk about, the lightweight division. You've got probably the 2 front runners on Australian domestic boxing in Jacob NG from Queensland. He's an IBF world-rated fighter, and also George Kambosos, who fights next month in December. His biggest fight yet against a former world champion in Mickey Bay. So they're the 2 best in terms of the lightweight division.
Where's Mickey Bay from?
He's from America, but has been inactive for a couple of years. So if George Kambosos is going to get him, it's going to be now. He's going to be his biggest name on the CV if he can win that, and maybe a lightweight title opportunity could be on the horizon shortly for George Kambosos. The likes of Lomachenko, who's the lightweight champion. So you never know.
I've seen there was a little bit of talk about that.
Yeah, both are part of Top Rank, so Bob Arum's banner, so they can definitely make that matchup to sort of happen next year. So I would not be surprised if the Ukrainian takes on the Australian next year sometime.
That would be so amazing to see one of our Aussie boys fighting Lomachenko.
Yeah, there was
love to see that.
There was also talk this year, Kai McKenzie, who's another lightweight, going to fight Lomachenko this year, but that did not happen because Kai McKenzie was WBO number 2 at the time. He fought on November's card back last year against Francis Chua, and he lost that fight, so he didn't get the opportunity to fight Lomachenko. They were going to set that up for Parramatta Stadium, but that didn't come to fruition. So now it's a good opportunity for George Kambosos. He's still only young. He's 26 years of age, and he's got all in front of him. A lot of years left in him. He's got a high ceiling level, and against the best in the business for me, pound for pound, number one in Lomachenko. Well, definitely, I'm looking forward to that.
And who else can we look out for on the lightweight scene? Who's coming up?
Yeah, so I'm on the lightweight scene in Australia. As I mentioned before, Kai McKenzie, he fought Francis Chua the other week. It'll be broadcast on Fox Sports tomorrow. So they had their second fight, and for me, this was contender for fight of the year. So definitely watch that on Fox Sports tomorrow. Kai McKenzie and Francis Chua. In that fight, Kai McKenzie actually won the fight. So he's the new WBA Oceania lightweight champion. So he's won a regional belt, and now maybe we'll jump into the top 15 in the lightweight rankings.
Excellent.
And Francis Chua, as I mentioned, fought Kai McKenzie. He's 34 years of age. He's from Western Australia, from the Onyx Fight Team, from the same gym as Lucas Brown, the heavyweight. Yep. And he's an entertaining fighter, a southpaw. So they made for a fantastic fight to call, alongside Mark the Hammer Castanini and Barry Michael. And in the other sort of lightweights in Australia, one to watch out for that I'm really a big fan of, I called his first boxing fight, is Hunter Ioane. He's from Stand Up Fitness, undefeated record at this point in time, 5 KOs to his name out of 7 fights, 7-0, and he's only 24 years of age, and he hits like a heavyweight. I've watched a lot of his sparring sessions and called about 5 of his fights, and he's going to make waves in the lightweight division. I do believe that he's not only going to become an Australian lightweight champion, I do believe that he can become top 5 on the lightweight scene on the world stage. Wow. So watch out for him. Hunter Ioane, Samoan descent and unbelievable talent.
Fantastic. Thank you. That was an amazing rundown of the lightweight division. Hunter Ioane, you were showing me him the other day on Instagram. You were showing me him hitting the bags and telling me about his record. I think those guys are the ones that really excite me, are the ones that just have that X factor and something about them that is really exciting. And he's got a bit of flair about him as well. I think he's a little bit cocky.
Yes. He's a different character, Hunter Ioane. He's trained by the boys out there at Stand Up Fitness, as I mentioned, under Steve and Darren Hancock. They're both his trainers. Actually, their birthdays today. So happy birthday to both those boys.
Happy birthday.
But Hunter Ioane comes from a rugby background. He actually played for the Melbourne Rebels youth side and swapped to boxing 2 years ago, and only been boxing for 2 years. And he only lost one fight on the amateur scene to Matty Avdulis, who's trained by Christian Anor. So that was his only loss there. But on the professional scene, he's where his sort of style suits. Just a real power puncher, and he's going to go a long way. And he actually fights on the Wildfighter card December 14. So watch out for that. I can't wait
to watch. That's going to be a great card. You got Troy Bam Bam Bullock. I got the shirt on right here.
Bam Bam Bullock, undefeated, looking to keep the 100% record intact. Bam Bam.
He's got a tough. I can't remember what the guy's name is, but he's got a tough opponent coming up.
You haven't checked his opponent yet.
It's the guy who fought Khaled Baker and dropped him.
Okay, that is the boy from Mildura, Aaron Ross. That's
Aaron Ross, that's the one.
So Aaron Ross, his records, I think 4 wins, 6 losses. But as you mentioned, he dropped Khalid Baker in the opening round, and that was his toughest test yet, Khalid Baker.
So this is going to be a tough fight, but we're hoping that Bam Bam can get up, keep building that record, and then go for those Australian straps.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe a Victorian title. You look at the cruiserweights, sort of Victoria, Walid Hadara, Khalid Baker. So maybe that's on the horizon. But also Hunter Ioane will be fighting Ismail Kera in the lightweight division on Wildfighter.
Fantastic. And then Matty Avdulis is another one who's on that scene, on the pro scene now. He's had his fight, trained under the great and powerful Christian Enor.
Christian Enor's got some great fighters on his hands. Another lightweight by the name of Kane Superman Clark, 9-0.
If you don't know the name, you should.
He's a special fighter. He's an awkward fighter, Kane Clark. 1 minute he's there, the next he's not. Reminds me a little bit of Sam Solomon about him. And he's the ANBF Australasian champion. And he might get an Australian title shot shortly, maybe against Gage Island or one of those boys in 2020.
That would be excellent because Kane Clark obviously trains here sometimes. He's a great man as well. He's very mentally strong and confident. You get that aura from him, and also just a powerful athlete as well. A very explosive and powerful athlete. Hits very hard for a shorter guy as well.
Yeah, he hits very hard for a shorter guy. I remember watching one of his fights. I think it was at the end of 2018 against an unbeaten fighter in Francisco da Silva, and he actually stopped Francisco da Silva, who had a 100% record. But these are all the lightweights who have got a chance to win the Australian title from Gage Island. or even Brent Rice if he can win the trilogy matchup against Gage Island if that occurs in early 2020. So all these boys are a chance, but Matty Abdullah, as you mentioned, very skillful fighter. He fought at super lightweight on the Team Alice card that we both called, and he's got a high boxing IQ. And one thing about him, he's probably not the biggest puncher, but he's highly skilled, and that can take him a long way.
He is highly skilled and he has great defense and head movement. He's very slick as well. So I'm excited to see what young Matty Avdulis can do on the pro scene as well. Let's talk about 2020 for Australian boxing. Obviously, Australian boxing has come a long way over the past few years, and I see it really having a massive trajectory, hopefully, in 2020. And tell us what you project.
Yeah, 2020 is going to be a big year for Australian boxing, but there's one match that needs to happen in Australian boxing, and it's Jade Mitchell and Zach Dynamo Dunn. We just witnessed Jade Mitchell winning against Kashtanov from Russia, who had a record of 36-4, but Jade Mitchell overcome him, and for me, dominated from start to finish with his boxing.
It was a fantastic performance and great to watch.
Yeah, he can fight on the back foot, Jade Mitchell, but when he turns it on and he's on the front foot, you could see that he actually dropped Kashtanov in one of the rounds there, and should have been ruled a knockdown, but it wasn't. But
he hit him in the top of the head, I thought, and he went down.
Went down, yeah. So it was interesting that the referee didn't see that. But you look at Mitchell, he's world rated in the WBC rankings. But he's going to have a couple more fights he's got to deal with Hosking Promotions that all these fights will be broadcast on Fox Sports. So it's very good for him that, he showcases his skills, not just to Australia, but to the world scene. For me, I'd like to see him against Zach Dynamo Dunn. Zach Dunn has only tasted one loss in his career to David Brophy from the UK. That was on Big Time Boxing in March last year. So that's his only loss. But both are contrasting styles. That's what makes the fight interesting. You got Jade Mitchell, who's a neat boxer, and then Zach Dynamo Dunn, he loves to fight in the pocket, and he's a real power hitter with the majority of his wins coming by KO. So that's definitely, I think the fans would be in for a treat in terms of that matchup in the super middleweight division.
And do you think that the winner of that would get a world title shot?
Yeah, I think, the winner of that, you look at Zach Dunn, he's actually WBO number 3 at the moment. So it's all up to him if he wants to take the Jade Mitchell matchup or he goes in another direction. There's talk maybe about him fighting the WBO super middleweight champion in Billy Joe Saunders from the UK. And we know how good Billy Joe Saunders is. But
it'd be a hell of a fight for Zach Dunn.
Yeah, I think on paper, Billy Joe Saunders is probably the best super middleweight at this point in time, along with David Benavidez and also Callum Smith. And Canelo's can fight in that division as well. But for Zach Dynamo Dunn, it's a good opportunity if he goes, over to the UK and fights Billy Joe Saunders. But we'll wait and see if that plays out. But for the Australian matchups, that's one fight that I want to see, Jade Mitchell and Zach Dunn.
That would be a really, really incredible fight. But would that have to be on Hosking Promotion, or could that be a big time show?
Yeah, I think it could be probably be on Hosking Promotions that matchup in terms of Jade Mitchell being with them now. But for me, that's Jade Mitchell. If he doesn't fight Zach Dynamo Dunn, I think one fight I'd like to see him fight is John Ryder, who actually fought Callum Smith this weekend. John Ryder, for me, in my opinion...
Did he beat Bilal Akawai?
He beat Bilal Akawai as well this year, John Ryder, and he nearly beat Callum Smith. In a lot of people's minds, he actually defeated Callum Smith, the WBA super middleweight champion this weekend, but it didn't go to plan, and he won comfortably, Callum Smith, in terms of the judges, but others thought otherwise. But that's maybe another match of John Ryder or even Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. from Mexico. And we know Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is fighting Danny Jacobs December 21 over in America. So maybe the winner of that could come up against Jade Mitchell in the super middleweight division, as Danny Jacobs has now jumped up from middleweight to super middleweight. So if Jade Mitchell, fights Zach Dunn, well, there's going to be world title opportunities come next year.
Yeah, wow. And where do you see in terms of domestic? Because we have a lot of shows at the Pavilion. Fantastic venue. We love the Pavilion. It would be incredible to see Australian boxing shows and homegrown talent at headlining bigger shows at bigger stadiums next year.
Yeah, that's definitely the key for a lot of promoters, to move to the bigger stadiums, in maybe the likes of Marvel Stadium or those sort of stadiums in Melbourne.
Do you
Even
reckon the logical step would be your Margaret Court arenas and your Rod Laver arenas and then Marvel Stadium?
yeah,
'Cause Marvel Stadium's
yeah,
quite...
maybe even Amy Park as well,
Yeah,
which would be like a sort of football stadium, like a Wembley sort of atmosphere. They have that over in England, in the sort of smaller stadiums over there. Billy Joe Saunders has 14 smaller stadiums in terms of football stadiums, so maybe that's the idea. But that's definitely the key matchups in Australian boxing. The likes of George Kambosos maybe coming back to Australia, headlining and fighting in those sort of big stadiums in Victoria would be a good idea for Australian boxing.
right. And where's Bilal Akawai at the moment? Because he was probably the hottest prospect in Australian boxing until perhaps that loss to John Ryder.
Yeah, he's gone off the radar a little bit since that loss to John Ryder, but probably refreshing up a little bit, and there'll be maybe a couple of tune-up fights, maybe 2 or 3 tune-ups, and maybe he'll be back on the world stage probably at the end of 2020. But definitely a bright prospect, only a young boy, so he's got quite a sort of good future in Australian boxing. Bilal Akaway from New South Wales.
Do you think he'll get back on the domestic scene?
I think he'll probably get back on the domestic scene, fighting with a couple of promoters over in New South Wales, and then we'll see him back, over in maybe Golden Boy, because that's where he fought last, on the Golden Boy promotion over there in America. So maybe we'll see him back there against one of the super middleweights on the world stage.
That would be great. And one of the really exciting things is that we've got so many good boxers at the moment. I mean, we've just rattled off so many names. If you could put your finger on maybe, let's say a handful. Let's talk about maybe 5 people or somewhere around there, of guys who are really going to challenge and who have the potential to be solid world champions. Who would you single out?
I think one of them would definitely have to be Jason Maloney. I definitely do believe that he's got some big fights that could come to fruition next year. He had a good solid fight on the World Boxing Super Series against Emmanuel Rodriguez.
That was an amazing fight.
Unbelievable performance there. For me, that's one of the best sort of Australian performances in some time. He lost by a split decision, but it could have gone either way. And
definitely could have gone either way.
So there is talk about him fighting the Cuban fighter, a 2-time Olympic champion in Guillermo Rigondeaux next year, who's probably past his best now, but still a champion, a top fighter in the super bantamweight division. We know Jason Maloney's last fight was at in the bantamweight division, but he can easily jump up to super bantamweight, and both him and Rigondeaux could meet next year. So Jason Maloney would definitely have to be one of them. As I mentioned, I think George Kambosos would have to be up there. He's under the best probably management in the world under Bob Arum in Top Rank, and he can get those big fights in the lightweight division. I think it's probably going to be easy to make the Lomachenko fight next year. So maybe George Kambosos would probably have to be my number 2 name. If you look at maybe the third name that we haven't talked a little bit, I'd like to talk about a fighter that's gone under the radar. He's from Queensland. His name's Dempsey McKean. He's a heavyweight. He's probably the best Australian heavyweight that we've got at this point in time. But there's talk about him and Lucas Brown fighting in March next year on the Gold Coast. He's under the management of Ange DiCarlo and the boys there at Ace Boxing Promotions. So Lucas Brown's been our flag bearer in the heavyweight division for a long time. He's 40 years old at the moment, though, and he's had those big fights in England, against the White Rhino over there in Dave Allen, where he lost in April this year. He got stopped via a body shot, and he also fought one of the best heavyweights in the world last year in Dillian White. So, he provided a stern effort against Dillian White, but then ultimately got stopped in that matchup. So I think Dempsey McKean's definitely one on the horizon. He also won the Big Time Boxing's Frank Bianco Cup a couple of years back, but since then he's grown, and now he's a top 15 fighter in the heavyweight division. So watch out for him, Dempsey McKean, and maybe he'll be fighting Lucas Brown come next year.
Awesome. Fantastic. And then another one I wanted to talk to you about, now that we're on the topic of heavyweights. Yesterday I had Harry Garside on the podcast, who's a top amateur Commonwealth Games gold medalist, and he was talking about Justice Hooney, who came very close to reaching the final of the World Championships in the amateurs in Russia, but fell ill in this before the semi-final to get to the final. He looked unbelievable. If you were watching, I'm sure you were watching it over
Yeah,
there.
I was watching, and for me, he's got probably the best talent that we've had in some time.
Yeah.
Still,
Harry Garside, just to cut you off, sorry for 1 second, actually said that he believes that Justice Hooney in the future could be one of Australia's best athletes ever. He said he thinks that he'll become an Australian champion and a world champion in the heavyweight division, and it's just massive raps for this young man, and I've heard it from so many different directions as well. So
yeah, the thing is with Justice Hooney is not only a big puncher, but he knows how to box and find his way around a ring, and that's going to take him a long way. It reminds me a little bit about Tyson Fury, the way he goes about things, neat mover. His foot skills are unbelievable, and he had an opportunity to win that world title, but he succumbed to injury. And next year's sort of the bright lights where it matters, the 2020
which
Olympics,
is qualified for.
yeah, in Tokyo. So I think he's going to be a major player there. And I do believe that he's a real chance for maybe a top 3 finish there, bronze medal, silver, or even gold.
And if that does happen, that could propel him on to, being on the radar of the biggest promotions in the world.
Oh, definitely. The likes of Eddie Hearn might be on the phone to him. We know Eddie Hearn's under at the moment Matchroom Boxing, and also involved with DAZN as well, the streaming service that's being sort of broadcast around the world. Top Rank. And, there's some other big promoters as well. So, but the main two is probably Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn would be on the phone to him after a solid performance next year in Tokyo.
Nice. And anyone else you see who is, young and upcoming?
Yeah, one other boy by the name of Tim Tszyu. We all know who Tim Tszyu is, the son of Costa Tszyu. But,
it's hard. I can't believe we haven't talked about that division and that we've been here for so
yes,
long.
So Tim Tszyu can fight, around about, super welterweight or middleweight. But he's going to be fighting at super welterweight. He's actually got a fight against Jack Brubaker December 6th on main event. And, in that fight, he's the heavy favorite against Jack Brubaker. But we know that Jack Brubaker, he's an entertaining fighter. He'll bring out the best in Tim Tszyu. But I think that matchup is probably made for Tim Tszyu to make a real statement in the super welterweight division. I do believe he's going to go out there and stop Jack Brubaker live on TV on main event.
And Tim Tszyu, where do you see his progression after that?
Yeah, I think after that, he's had the big fights at the moment. The last sort of 3 fights have been good statements, and he's going to sort of aid in his development. But a stoppage here, and it's going to propel him. He's already a top 15 fighter in the super welterweight division. So in 2000, I don't think we're going to rush him into anything. He'll have a couple more tune-up fights, maybe against sort of easier opposition on the world stage. And then there's opportunities to fight the likes of the super welterweight champions, the likes of Julian Williams, these sort of guys, Jamel Charlo. These sort of names could be on the horizon at the end of 2020 or maybe in early 2021.
It would be amazing to see the son of Tim Tszyu, get up and yeah, that would be incredible.
Yeah, one thing about him, he's a real power hitter, Tim Tszyu. He's got that natural power, and that can take him a long way. So watch out for that December 6th. I think you're going to see Tim Tszyu make a statement against the ever reliable Jack Brubaker from New South Wales.
And just a bit more about that division.
Yeah, so in that division, you got another boy by the name of Iman Carlos as well. He's a Victorian, more of a local boy from the southeast region. He fights, but majority of his fights have been at middleweight, but he's dropped down for a couple of fights at super welterweight. But in that middleweight division, I think Iman Carlos is going to go a long way as well. His record currently stands at 11 wins and 1 loss. His last win was against Wes Kappa on the Kings of Combat card. That was, for me, one of the fights of the year so far in 2019. It was toe-to-toe stuff. Iman Carlos sustained a few shots there. He's going to improve a lot in terms of his defense. That's one thing he needs to work on, his defense. But he's got real natural skills in his boxing department. And he's only 27 years of age. And Anthony Mundine said he's definitely one to watch Iman Carlos in Australian boxing.
Awesome. So I think that pretty much sums up a lot of things. Is there anything else you think is particularly exciting going on with Australian boxing at the moment?
In terms of Australian boxing, it's coming towards the back end of the year, but one fight that I'm looking forward to is December 18, the rematch between Michael Pretty Boy Zarafa and Jeff Horn. We know Jeff Horn's a former WBO welterweight champion, but he's decided to sort of make a rematch because there was a rematch clause involved in that matchup after the loss.
Michael Zarafa's not happy about it.
Yeah, he's not happy about it because there was an opportunity maybe for him fighting over in Japan against the WBA champion over there in Ryoto Murata. but it was some big money on offer there. But he goes back to a fight against Jeff Horn, and it's a tough fight for Jeff Horn. I'd love to see him fight in the super welterweight division. Considering he's a natural welterweight, I'd like to see him just fight the division above, but he's decided to fight Zerafa 2 divisions above again, and I do believe that we're going to see the same result. I don't know if Michael Zerafa is going to stop him again, but I do believe that Michael Zerafa will win probably, in terms of my prediction, via unanimous decision, and that's when Zerafa will have maybe fighting against some of the big fish in the middleweight division next year.
Well, do you think that would then propel Michael Zerafa to definitely get those international shots?
Yeah, definitely going to get those international shots if he comes through Jeff Horn. That's definitely great to have on the record. 2 wins over Jeff Horn, former world champion. But he's learned a lot, Michael Zerafa, over the years. He fought over in Russia against Magomedov at a young age, and he lost that fight. Then he got stopped by Peter Quillen, and that was over in America. That was his first American fight. And he lost that matchup. And, ever since then, he's only improved as a fighter. He's one of the hardest working fighters in the business, Michael Zerafa. And, it's put him in good stead, for this point in time. And it was a great win over in Bendigo on August 31st against Jeff Horn the first time around. And if he does it again, well, those sort of power hitters and power plays in the middleweight division are going to take notice, and we might see the likes of Gennady Golovkin come up against Michael Zerafa. But I think what we're going to see is the Japanese champion in Ryota Murata fight Michael Zerafa next year.
Do you think that will be in Japan?
Yeah, I think over in Japan, he's a big sort of a big fighter over in Japan. He's one of the most well supported fighters over in Japan, Ryota Murata, and he's got a lot of backing from the Japanese people, and that will probably be fought at Tokyo Stadium, over in Japan. So it's a good opportunity for Michael Zerafa to win a world title come next year. So we got to wait and see how that plays out. But more importantly, his focus is for December 18 against Jeff Horn. Over in Queensland. So Jeff Horn's going to have a lot of support over in Queensland, but I think that you're going to see Mr. Zerafa, pretty boy, spoil the apple cart over there, and he'll get the chocolates.
Well, I'm very excited about Michael Zerafa, and also to see him fight like a guy who will go down as a legend of Australian boxing after that Pacquiao victory like Jeff Horn will be great. I think that pretty much sums it up, mate. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you on social media so that they can keep updated?
Yeah, so social media, you can find me on Jordan Ballerini. So Ballerini is Ballerini, and just add another I to that for my Instagram account. And it was great chatting to you, Jake. You're doing great things in commentating, and it was great calling alongside you. And hopefully we have many more calls alongside each other for big-time boxing under Brian Armatruda.
Absolutely. That would be amazing. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, mate. And hopefully I'll see you in 2020 for some big shows.
Oh, yeah. Brian Armatruda is going to put on some great cards 2020. Watch the space. Jake Edgington and Jordan Ballerini alongside Matt Pilios in the commentating booth.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys. Thank you.